And my family dynamic already wasn't typical because when I was like 6, I think my mom and my dad got divorced. And so that's highly, highly uncommon
Yeah.
in
I was
Indian
gonna say
culture.
that's
Yeah.
pretty rare.
Yeah, it's pretty taboo in Indian and in Muslim culture. Um,
Yeah, so this guy must have been pretty bad news if they went that extra mile to get like a divorce and everything. So he must have not have been a good influence at all on his family.
so,
Like I've never had an Indian friend whose like parents were divorced or something. So
but it was for the right reasons. My dad wasn't like the best person, and our lives significantly improved after the divorce. So he was still kind of in and out of my life, and I think I finally kind of like stopped talking to him when I turned 18. I stopped taking his calls as much.
Oh
I
wow.
started to take his calls less and less over the years, and now I think it's been like um, maybe like 6 years since I've talked to him. Um, So, but I mean, yeah, my life significantly improved. The more I distanced myself from that. So
yeah,
it
that is really intense to have not talked to your parent in that long. Oops. To have not talked to one of your parents in that long. I didn't talk to my mom for a while. She was in another state, but I don't think it was anything like that. And we still like called and stuff. I just didn't go and see her, everything like that. So something, it must have been pretty serious if she didn't talk, if she doesn't talk to him anymore.
it's like I came from a kind of traditional
Something sort of on the scale of what Mr. Girl must have gone through.
culture, but my family kind of stuck out because we didn't really fall into that role very well.
Did you ever feel like because of the stigma associated with like your parents' divorce and stuff that did you ever feel like somewhat ostracized from like the Muslim community or like the South Asian Muslim community?
I felt like because people knew my mom, they understood, but there was still always a little bit of a stigma around it. It certainly was non-traditional, and I did feel like I did feel like judged for it, even though it wasn't my fault, even though it wasn't her fault. Um, it wasn't any of our faults. Uh, it was his fault.
Yeah.
But I still felt like I was judged for it. I still felt like
She probably was.
I also felt so my dad was like very, very ill, very I think he was like on top of just being like a psychopath. I think he had like schizoaffective disorder.
Oh wow.
Oh, holy
And
shit.
yeah, and so when we did, my mom still wanted my brother.
You haven't talked to them in 11 years. Yeah, I mean, uh, it's usually got to be something pretty serious, I would think. When somebody stops talking to one or more of their parents for that long. Um, my parents aren't completely brain rotted narcissists. They're kind of like borderline, where it's like it's like I don't want to call my dad a narcissist. I don't think it really is like that. But my mom sort of really does have those traits, and it comes out more clearly over time. So I do always want to keep distance from her just because it's like she pulls you in and makes all this shit about herself and makes this whole situation with her weird attitudes and everything where it's like she has to go through these tense times with people. It's just fucking annoying. Um but people who've gone through big difficulties with parents or who have a parent they can't really be around that much or never, they just want to be around them never. I think that people whose lives are completely stable and didn't have all of this volatility have a hard time empathizing with that. There's a bunch of people whose parents are pretty stable or completely stable and actually really chill people. And so they've never, their experiences of instability and volatility might be completely from afar, besides like when they started dating or something. And then other people, like myself, or people with even worse experiences with their parents, experienced volatility and instability from when they were tiny children. Maybe before they could make or active memories, even they just have like these impressions from when they were a child and their fucking parents were crazy at them, which I think it played a big part in, my own later mental health after reading about how that affects children. There's all these experiences that people with like one or two fucked up parents experience that people without fucked up parents might never, until later in life when they've had more experience as a person.
Her and I to maintain contact with him because she didn't want to be seen as one of those
This is an enormous experience gap if you really think about it. If you really think about how important someone's household is in their development as a person.
Mothers who gets divorced and then poisons their children against their father.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't really take her saying anything about him for us to already be terrified of him. So I don't think when we lived together, I don't think there was I don't think we ever felt safe with him.
Damn.
I think my earliest memory of my dad is like we were at the beach and he was holding me under the water, and I was screaming and crying because I couldn't breathe.
Oh my god.
Yeah, sorry, you didn't mean to get so dark so quickly.
No, but
it is really dark. People have a lot of crazy, intense shit that they deal with. I don't want to just say like crazy because I was looking for my water. I don't want to just say crazy, but a lot of intense shit that they deal with. And people who may have came from like a cycle of violence or trauma or something in their own household, a very serious one, with direct physical abuse and no escape. These sorts of things can factor into their development and create a person who's fucking dangerous, like apparently her father. And I used to suffer from violent intrusive thoughts and perverted intrusive thoughts. And so, like, I have experience with what is probably like the first steps to being that physically abusive. I've never been physically abusive, but someone who's never had an intrusive thought like that before, besides maybe like their sexuality as an adult, they don't know what the fuck that is. They might even think that's like a dangerous psychopath as someone who has just that kind of ideation. And here, her father doesn't just ideate, but apparently fucking does it.
Should probably put a trigger, like a content warning.
Yeah,
we're gonna be talking about abuse and stuff, but please continue as long as you're comfortable.
This is my kind of content.
Yeah.
That sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
It might sound a little morbid, but this is just the shit I'm into. That's it. Like, I could just, if this interview was 30 hours long, I'd watch the whole thing. I really like this. I think this is gonna be my vibe. Do you mind, Rev?
Yeah, so that's like my earliest memory of my dad, which should probably like indicate like we never really felt safe around him. Even after the divorce, she still wanted us to kind of keep contact with him. And so we did. He would come and visit, but because of his illness and because of just who he is, he would make a scene wherever we went. If like he took us out to like a restaurant or something, he would inevitably make a scene in the restaurant. And we felt embarrassed by it, and obviously like the restaurant people would know that it wasn't our fault, but they would be mad at him. And so even visiting him was nerve-wracking because you didn't really know what he was going to do. And he was also like very like emotionally manipulative of my brother, especially. I think I was kind of a little bit more disconnected from him, but he would do or say things that would specifically get my brother upset, and that would get me really upset with him. That would get me really angry with him.
That's interesting. So this is sort of like a level. I don't think my parents never reached this kind of level. This is like active, like malignant influence on your family. My mom, I think she was probably the more damaging of the two parents, just like her temperament. And it had a lot to do with her not understanding how to control her own anxiety and her having been, pretty badly physically abused in her youth. I, you know, um, I don't know how bad. She never went into detail or anything. But what she's describing right now just sounds like a fucking a totally antisocial person, and not antisocial in the internet vernacular sense, but somebody who does these negative things to people and probably either feels nothing about it or even feels good about it, and gets through life via manipulations and maybe even theft, these sorts of things. Someone who doesn't care about the rules fundamentally, doesn't think they apply to them, and is a negative influence on those around them. And then there's an antisocial personality disorder, which is basically like psychopathy. So that's kind of what it's sounding like here. If he like fucks with them at restaurants and like manipulates the children, you know.
Um, and it was my
It,
older
like,
brother, so
was he
yeah.
like manipulating your brother like against your family or something, or was it
No,
more targeting him specifically?
he would say things like he would say things to kind of provoke us, right? Like he would say that like your mom's a whore, or like he would say something like really um he would say he would come up with these really weird narratives um that she was in contact with like the royal family or something like that. And obviously that's like the illness, but him calling her a whore when he was like also cheating like throughout the marriage was, ridiculous, you know? So, yeah. So
Classic projection.
yeah, classic projection, yeah. Um which by the way, I don't think she ever saw anybody uh outside of my dad. But uh so yeah, so so it was kind of weird. Um kind of like growing up with somebody who was so unstable, somebody who we always felt unsafe around.
Damn.
Luckily, they did get divorced because my mom noticed it was affecting us.
Yeah.
It did feel weird.
It's really sad because this is one of those sort of downsides of having that sort of societal pressure to like upkeep a marriage is in the US this would be more likely to cause a separation much earlier, or to even cause someone more, perhaps more likely that they would even get out before it's a marriage. But once you get sort of momentum going under some traditional sort of dating attitudes, it might be more difficult. You might have fewer outs, especially once you're actually married. And as well, these sorts of things can actually get worse in key parts of someone's life. So I'm not like a psychiatrist or whatever, but from what I understand, big clusters of personality disorders begin to come out more like in some people's late 20s or mid 20s or early adulthood or late teens. There's a spread like that. So you might not even know that somebody's going to turn into something this bad until it's already happening and you're like locked in. So that's really fucked.
weird, being kind of like stigmatized, being kind of like feeling like I didn't quite fit in, feeling like I couldn't
Yeah,
really talk about my dad whenever my
Mhm.
friends brought him up.
that's scary.
Like, where's your dad? What's your dad up to? Um, Eventually, he
Yeah,
moved
being fucking crazy.
to Texas, I think. And he would come and visit every once in a while. But yeah, it was very strange. For a long time, I couldn't really talk about him openly.
Right.
I don't know why. I just felt like he
Well,
was this.
probably feel like being a hostage in your own home. I've thought about stuff like this before. Why it is that people who are under the grip of mental some sort of social and personality disorders like this, why it is that they manipulate people like their children. And I think one of the reasons is they have this grasp on what manipulation does. It's like this cunning or like this cleverness. They're not. Many of them aren't active manipulators. It's just all they know, and they understand that if you wrap someone up in all of these manipulations and lies, they can't leave. Basically, their life and their views and their emotions are so fucked up on this roller coaster that they will just stay in your orbit, basically. And it gets harder and harder to get out of their orbit. Um, like the more locked into all of these grievances and shit you might get. It's like a real abusive cycle and an abusive manipulation like strategy. But some people come out of cycles of trauma so intense that that is what was done to them. And maybe they didn't even leave under what they thought were bad terms. The household was just that shitty that that's who they are now. And this happens all the time. All across the world, in the U.S., outside.
Secret
It's just like untalked about part of like fairly common society.
that I had to like kind of bury. So
So,
yeah,
do you think that that was more of like Western cultures focus, especially like it's only recently that people have been talking openly about mental health and abuse and all of that kind of stuff. But like then there's also another layer that you're also dealing with being like in the South Asian Muslim community. So, do
yeah.
you think it was both of those
I think
things
it
or
was a little bit of
primarily one?
both. I think it was a little bit of both. Yeah, yeah,
That sounds insanely tough. It sounds like your childhood specifically is like super unstable.
Yeah,
Like the what really struck me is like that you of what you said is that you're just in like this constant fear of like what's the next thing he's gonna do. Like it's
right.
just he's unpredictable.
yeah, yeah. I mean, like, I have to give my mom credit because she worked very hard to give us like everything we needed growing up. But there was still always this kind of shadow kind of hanging over me, and I couldn't.
Hmm.
I felt like my dad was like a secret I couldn't talk about. Uh, and I couldn't talk about him with anybody. Um,
Right.
whether that was like friends at school or if that was people.
This is like, okay, so this is a form of codependence. This is like a really severe form, kind of. Because, like, in codependence, what often happens is you get these two people, and one is a caretaker, and the other needs to be taken care of. And the caretaker, like, inherently knows there's something shameful about their position. And so they sort of try to hide some aspects of the person they're taking care of. So when you're sort of hiding somebody because they're just that fucking intense, it's sort of like this extreme version of codependence, and it just eats at you constantly. It fucking just releases stress hormones into your body. You really truly do hate these aspects of the person that you're caretaker to, but it's like you're locked in. It's really strange. It's something that happens in manipulative households whose parents have like anxiety disorders and stuff and don't instill very good temperaments in their infants and small children. This is just something that happens.
people in the South Asian community.
And there's probably another layer when you're part of this subculture that has such intense traditional family values. Uh, Not that long ago, the U.S. was similar. Like many of your ancestors, if they lived in the U.S., may have lived in traditionalist households where where you had to just have a family member like this if it took place. You know what I mean? Them being like a weird asshole may not have been enough for people to look to like be like, well, the father of that household is wrong. You know what I mean? There is that much authority that a father might have where they could just be a total manipulative piece of shit, just like a drunk asshole, but they had final say over the household until they may have like beaten or raped one of their kids or something. Like that was it. You had to wait until they really fucked up someone, like their spouse or one of their kids.